Welcome to today's lecture as part of the University of New England's 29th Annual Martin Luther King Jr. Celebration. My name is Richard Anderson Martinez, and I serve as the Director of the Office of Intercultural Student Engagement. Thank you for joining us. We'd also like to thank the Secaucus and Abenaki peoples whose land we are gathered on this afternoon. And hello to those of you joining us via live stream. Each year, the university honors the legacy of MLK Jr. and the civil rights movement through educational programs, creative art projects, and community service. So as many of you know, MLK Jr. visited our campus way back in 1964 to deliver a speech on civil disobedience as part of a symposium here on human rights. So thank you to the staff and the alumni of St. Francis College for this contribution to history and to our university's culture. Before you leave today, please stop by the art wall in the lobby of this building to view art projects created by students enrolled in the Advanced Diversity Leadership Certificate program. The artwork is inspired by a series of documentaries produced by the National Endowment for the Humanities, focused on the history of Black people in America, which students viewed over the fall semester.
Good afternoon. My name is Erica Russo, and I'm the new Associate Director of Intercultural Student Engagement. And it's my pleasure to introduce today's speaker. Charlene A. Carruthers is a Black queer feminist community organizer and writer with over 10 years of experience in racial justice, feminist, and youth leadership development work. And she currently serves as the National Director of the Black Youth Project 100. It's an activist member-led organization of 18 to 35-year-old Black youth dedicated to creating justice and freedom for all Black people. Her passion for developing young leaders to build capacity within marginalized communities has led to her work on immigrant rights, economic justice, civil rights campaigns nationwide. She has led grassroots and digital strategy campaigns for national organizations, including the Center for Community Change, the Women's Media Center, colorsofchange.org, and National People's Action, as well as being a member of a historic delegation of young activists in Palestine in 2015 to build solidarity between Black and Palestinian liberation movements. Please join me in welcoming Charlene to the stage.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for being here today. This is an amazing opportunity, especially as folks all around the world are celebrating and reflecting on Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s legacy. On one hand, it is very, very clear that he should be celebrated, his work. And on the other hand, we should also know that, as Ella Baker said, Martin didn't make the movement made Martin, right? And so he was one person, a pivotal person, an important person, a crucial person to the movement. And there were so many people who were engaged and involved in that movement that made it possible, and even make it possible for us to commemorate his life and his legacy. And so I'm very happy to be here today and share words with you all about what I believe to be one of the most pressing issues facing our society. I'd like to thank the Office of Intercultural Student Engagement for this opportunity and for inviting me to engage your students in perhaps an uncomfortable conversation at minimum, but at best something that hopefully you all walk away with knowing something that you didn't know before, right? Because otherwise, it's like I just spent an hour here. Maybe I fulfilled a requirement. But my job is to hopefully agitate you around some of the ideas that you hold most dearly, make you a little bit uncomfortable, and then make you want to do something about it, right, after this. And so folks love to share quotes by Dr. King, right? Love it. Does anybody have a favorite MLK quote that you can remember off the top of your head? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. See another hand? Oh, that was you scratching your ear. Okay, that's okay. So every year, people card out a list of quotes. But what I want to start us off with is one of his most basic quotes: is that an injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Right? Very simple. And we all likely know that this idea was grounded in the white supremacist practices of the Jim Crow South, the economic depression of black people in the North, and violence inflicted upon black people by the police nationwide. And so, as I said, without a doubt, we know that Dr. King was a pivotal figure in the long-term project for black liberation. Right? It's situated as the civil rights movement. Let's be clear, the civil rights movement is a part of a continuum. Right? Black folks didn't start struggling for freedom and equity or equality or justice during the civil rights movement. And towards the later years of his life, before he was murdered, King embarked on organizing work that focused on the margins of folks in black society, right, and in America at large. And so his work to shed light on the violence of capitalism and hypermilitarism created a different type of opening in what civil rights and human rights work should be. And so many of us know less about his anti-capitalist work. Many of us know less about his critiques of the American empire, of the Vietnam War. Those things are essential. And what I most recently learned, what's even more important, is who he learned many of those things from, and they were black women, right? And so even his consciousness about poor people, because Dr. King didn't grow up poor, right? Clear. His consciousness about poor people was highly informed by women who were part of the National Welfare Rights Organization, right? Who, during one meeting, checked him on his lack of knowledge about welfare rights in this country. And so, much like those women back then, young people, which include many, many young black women, young black queer folks, trans folks, gender nonconforming folks, are creating another opening. Our work stands in the legacy of black feminists, queer folks, and trans folks who blazed trails decades ago, be it Miss Major, or Audre Lorde, Marsha P. Johnson, Barbara Smith, Bayard Rustin, or James Baldwin. We've always had to push the envelope on how the we and how liberation are defined. So one of the ways this shows up best is through my work in my organization, the Black Youth Project 100. Right? So BYP 100, we are a national organization of young black activists between the ages of 18 and 35. And we were founded in the aftermath of the George Zimmerman verdict, where he was found not guilty in the killing of Trayvon Martin. And our collective, we were gathered in a retreat center, a fancy retreat center, right outside of Chicago. And we were gathered in that particular moment, like right when the verdict was announced. And out of that moment, we decided that it was imperative for us to not just do something and be activists, but to organize a national base of young black folks who did organizing work through what we call a black queer feminist lens. And folks like Dr. Kathy Cohen and Dr. Barbara Ransby have been pivotal in us developing that analysis. And it absolutely stands on the work of so many other groups and institutions. I think of groups like the Young Women's Empowerment Project in Chicago, obviously the Combahee River Collective, the African American Policy Forum, which I especially have to lift up the work of Kimberly Crenshaw and Andrea Ritchie, because their report, Say Her Name, is where the whole idea of Say Her Name was coined. And serves as a foundation for the topic of today's talk. Say Her Name, stories and strategies to end mass criminalization. And so the list goes on, the Audre Lorde Project, and there's so many more who do the hard work of centering all black women in this girls in this work, which has been essential to getting us all free. Because make no mistake, as women like Claudia Jones have said before us, if black women are free, then we all can be free. We all will be free. And we should take that further. If people who are sex workers are free and no longer oppressed, then we can all be free and no longer oppressed. And it goes on and on and on from there. And so some students asked me earlier how I even got into this work and how I started thinking about this work in this way. Well, I grew up on the south side of Chicago, running the streets with my cousins in Woodlawn, and we lived in the back of the yards and in Gage Park and Inglewood. And those were the places where I first learned about power. Because if we want to talk about ending mass criminalization, it's fundamentally an issue of power and how power plays out in the world. And so I entered like actual activism, organizing work as a college student. However, as I mentioned, what I've learned about blackness, what I've learned about queerness, feminism, that didn't come from a classroom for me. I'm a college graduate. I also went to graduate school for social work, but I didn't learn how it is to be me and what it means for other people who are like me to live in this world within a classroom. That doesn't say that you can't do that or that you shouldn't, but that was not my experience. And most recently, it has really been the story of a young black woman from the south side of Chicago and her family's enduring commitment to give her voice that keeps me moving. So how many of you have heard the name Rekia Boyd before? Raise your hand. All right. So on March 21st, 2012, Rekia Boyd was with her friends walking through an alley on the west side of Chicago when Chicago Police Department officer Dante Servin shot and killed her. He shot her over his shoulder as they were actually walking away. So you can just imagine, like, he's in his car and he shoots her in the back of the head over his shoulder. Earlier that evening, he called to report a so-called loud party in Douglas Park. This is all, again, on the west side of Chicago. Witnesses who were there report that he was actually intoxicated. He was definitely, what we know is that he was off duty that night, and that he took it upon himself to police a group of young black people, and in doing so, he took one young woman's life. And her family continues to mourn and fight for her today. In that particular moment, Rekia and her friends were deemed like unacceptable to be in that space. Like, they weren't supposed to be there by virtue of them being loud. You all can imagine the times that you've been loud with your friends walking around. And Dante Servin claiming that he felt threatened by their sheer presence, claiming that he saw a gun when in fact someone had a cell phone in their hands. But still, many of us don't even know about Rekia Boyd. If I ask you who knows Trayvon Martin's name, raise your hand. Folks know Trayvon Martin, yeah. Freddie Gray, Mike Brown, and we should know their names. We should know their names and we should know their stories, but we should also know about Rekia Boyd. And one of the reasons why I even know about Rekia Boyd is because of her family. To be clear, they were the first people to fight for justice in the aftermath of her death. And shortly after, concerned community leaders and activists joined the fight. But few people hit the streets in the same way as they did after Mike Brown was killed, or by Ferguson police officer Darren Wilson, or as well as we all did, including myself, after Freddie Gray was murdered in Baltimore. In fact, like I said, I'm certain that I didn't actually learn about her story until long after she was killed. BYP 100 didn't exist in 2012. I didn't even live in Chicago in 2012. I was living in New York City. However, unlike most police officers who kill unarmed people, Dante Servin was actually charged with manslaughter for the killing of Rekia Boyd, and actually sat in the courtroom. This was in 2015. I sat in the courtroom during the trial and had the opportunity to speak with Rekia's mom. And her mom, Miss Angela, she said to me, shortly after meeting her, I sat down next to her on the bench in the courtroom. She said, and I just introduced myself, and she said, they never talk about the women and the girls. They only talk about the boys and the men. And she's sitting there looking at the man who killed her daughter. There's no question about whether or not he killed her. And I'll never forget those words from her. And I continue to hold on to those words today. And in fact, she was right. right? And the truth of that matter is uncomfortable yet necessary for us all to hold. And so on April 20th, 2015, the judge in the case, Judge Dennis Porter, ruled that the state and its prosecutors had failed to prove that Dante Servant acted recklessly, which is a condition to find someone guilty in manslaughter, right? And so Judge Porter believed that actually the state's attorney, Anita Alvarez, undercharged Servant and that he could have been charged with murder. For many, this ruling was a gross technicality, right? One, officers are rarely indicted for killing unarmed people, right? That rarely happens. However, this is nothing short of typical practices found throughout our so-called criminal justice system. In my opinion, as a person who did not lose their daughter, to be clear, Rekia Boyd was not my sister. I didn't know Rekia Boyd. This is business as usual. And for her family, it seemed to signal a need to continue to fight, even in the midst of gross mistreatment from the state and trauma inflicted upon them. They haven't given up yet. They haven't. They refuse to give up. And Rekia Boyd, unfortunately and tragically, is one of many transgender and cisgender black women who have been criminalized, incarcerated, or killed under systems of state violence. One of way too many, just one of many. The list of names is long, right? And she's one of many who've been criminalized, incarcerated, or killed under systems of state violence. If we want to be serious about the work of Dr. King, or if we want to celebrate his dream of living in a better world, Rekia Boyd has to be included in what that dream is, right? The taking of her life has to be included in what that dream is. And as I said, the list of names is long, and their stories are, while they are painful, they also hold serious and important notes of resistance. Maya Hall, she's a 27-year-old black transgender woman killed in Baltimore not long before Freddie Gray. Most of us haven't heard her name. Tanisha Anderson. She was 37 years old. She's a 37-year-old black cisgender woman who was killed in Cleveland, Ohio just 1 week before Tamir Rice. Just 1 week. The police had been called to the home to help. And Tanisha, in that moment, was going through a mental health issue, and they killed her. They killed her. She died. She died. Marissa Alexander and CeCe McDonald. How many folks know Marissa Alexander? I hope you've heard of Marissa Alexander. So Marissa Alexander is a black woman, a mother, who shot actually into the air and away from her husband, or the father of her children, right? In self-defense, and was charged with well over 2 decades. Was convicted and given well over 2 decades of time in prison. That was their initially what was going to happen. And she eventually took a plea bargain so she could return home and actually be with her children. And I'm sure she has many other reasons for why she took that, right? And I'm in no place to judge her for that decision. But she was incarcerated. She was in prison for protecting herself, in defense of herself and her children. CeCe McDonald, a similar story. She was defending herself from someone who was attacking her, and she is a black transgender woman, and she was also incarcerated, and fought with the support of people outside, people within her community, and she has also been released. They both continue to fight today, right? And Marissa is actually continuing to do this while on house arrest. They put her on house arrest, so the state continues to monitor and surveil her life, right? And so the criminalization of black women and girls is perpetuated through so many systems, be it the welfare office, and that's the place where I first learned about how power impacts black women and girls when I was a child in the welfare office with my mother. In our homes, as we look at the story of Marissa Alexander, who was in her home trying to protect herself and her children. Or on the streets, black trans women like Monica Jones, who was profiled as being a sex worker. And whether or not she was, she shouldn't be criminalized for simply walking down the street, right? It doesn't matter. I don't care whether or not whomever is or isn't a sex worker. You shouldn't be stopped and harassed by the police simply for walking down the street. And that's what she was doing. So what is criminalization, right? I'm going to give a textbook answer, or their definition for what criminalization is. Criminalization is a process in which behaviors and people are marked, be it by the law, by the media, or public perception, as crimes and criminals, right? You are a criminal. You're a criminal, or what you do is a crime, right? And the process of marking people as criminal does not always actually relate to those people having committed a crime, right? More so, it has to do with an identity that is associated with society's ideas about who is the other, who does things wrong, and who should be punished. Trayvon Martin was walking down the street with a hoodie on. He happened to be out of school because he was suspended, and hopefully you all know a little bit about the school-to-prison pipeline. He was definitely a victim of that. And George Zimmerman figured he was doing something wrong. By simple virtue of him walking down the street with a hoodie on, he was deemed criminal. Mike Brown, very similar. Rekia Boyd and her friend, so-called being loud in the alleyway. That must be a threat to somebody. And all too often for young black people, that criminalization results in our death. In our death. Laquan McDonald. Many of y'all know about Laquan McDonald. This is most recent. Laquan McDonald, the 17-year-old black boy in Chicago who was shot 16 times. Execution style. 16 times. There were several officers, him with perhaps, or in the video, claims of him having a pocket knife. Like that was the danger that he was imposing. He was shot 16 times to death, right? Someone who needed help was killed. I could go all day with the names of how black folks, and particularly young black women and girls, are criminalized. For some of us, we need numbers, right? Some folks, we need the data. Well, the data exists, and it's there. The numbers are there. Lots of folks talk about stop and frisk in New York City, right? And usually when we hear about stop and frisk, we hear about how it impacts black and Latino men. But in 2013, some of the more recent numbers, of all the women who were stopped by police in the city of New York, over 50% of them were black women. Over 50%. A little bit over 27% were Latina women, and 13.4% of them were white women. Black folks make up about 27% of New York City's population, but over half of the women stopped by police were black women. On black girls are suspended at much higher rates than girls of any other race, right? And we're talking about in their schools, within their schools, right? And at a rate that is higher than most boys, with the exception of black boys, and these girls make up 2 out of 3 suspensions. And these disparities, they began very, very early. Very early. I'm talking preschool. And so while black students make up about 18% of students enrolled in preschool, they make up nearly half of students who've had at least 1 out-of-school suspension. And so those numbers come from the U.S. Department of Education, the African American Policy Forum, U.S. Census Bureau numbers, all that. And there are many other numbers. The numbers that tell us how often black women and girls are sexually harassed by police officers. And it's depressing, right? It can be depressing, but there's something we can actually do about it. And that is something that people are actually doing about it right now. So how can we address this? We that are in this room. I'm not talking about the we that's up the street and around the corner, but the we that are in this room right now. The first thing we have to do is actually commit to looking to restorative and transformative justice practices. That means that the police and prisons are not our primary sites on how we deal with harm and conflict in our communities. I've yet in my lifetime ever had an experience where I called the police and they actually helped. I've yet to have that experience. Maybe some of you have had that experience. But as a Black queer woman, I have not had that experience. As a Black child, I did not have that experience. That is not my experience. And so because we're in a university and, again, people need data, people need facts, or people need definitions, I'm going to share a definition of what restorative justice is. So restorative justice emphasizes repairing the harm caused by unjust behavior rather than blaming the person. It looks to restore the person and the community as well as the harm committed. There are models of this practice, right, in schools as an alternative to policing, suspensions, and incarceration. My own organization, we've committed to the struggles of restorative justice practices when violence has been committed by our own members against people in our community. It's not easy, and it takes a lot of emotional labor, but I believe that it's necessary because as Dr. King believed in, like, this work has to be done out of love. And there's no love in the prison system or policing in America. So we have to invest in building real mechanisms of accountability, even when it involves someone that we love dearly. And that's what we have to do. And that's what we do within my organization. So transformative justice, which is the other piece that I mentioned that we actually need to be about and commit to in this work. And it's a somewhat simple definition, but it's a big thing. It's a big thing. And as defined by a group called Generation 5, it is a liberatory approach to violence, which seeks safety and accountability without relying on alienation, punishment, or state or systemic violence, including incarceration or policing. So, in simple terms, it means that we look at other systems and we build other systems that don't include incarceration or policing. And that actually create alternative systems that are not punitive. Because America has punished itself into a nearly $80 billion industry a year. We spend upwards of $80 billion a year putting people in cages. Imagine what we could do with $80 billion. What would you do with $80 billion in your communities? People shout it out. What did you say? What did you say? Pay your loan? Word. Free college education for everybody. What else? What would you do with $80 billion? I would do that too. Mental health institutions, right? Like actual mental health services that are community-based, not punitive, and don't take us back to what they were and what they continue to be, right? What else? Preventative health care, right? Preventative health care. We're in the great state of Maine that's pioneered quite a bit. Well, New England has pioneered quite a bit when it comes to health care in this country. What else? Homes for the homeless. Community centers. And EL stands for? English language. Thank you. There's so many things that we could do with that, right? So many things. But I believe that a strategy that's based in transformative justice opens the possibilities also of a praxis of abolition, which is something that I'm personally committing myself to studying and also fighting for. Abolition, despite what popular rhetoric may tell us, is yes, about the dismantling of violent systems like policing, and prison. It is also about creating a world with systems and institutions that allow us to live within our full dignity. Abolition, as a practice and a theory, requires us to envision a world where safety is fully realized beyond policing, because the police do not keep us safe. And I should say all of us safe. The police keep some people safe, right? You're more likely to be safe if you are a property owner, if you are white, if you are able-bodied, if you are cisgender, if you are a citizen, if you are a Christian. All these certain things that hold privileges and power in society, right? But they surely do not keep me safe. I don't feel safe at all with the police. And I don't feel that my family is safe with the police or my friends as well. Abolition as a praxis requires us to also dismantle capitalism, patriarchy, homophobia, and transphobia. You don't just get rid of the police and the prisons without the things that accompany them, right? Abolition is not about creating a utopia where no harm is done and where conflict doesn't happen. That's not what this is about. Saying that tomorrow you don't have to worry about in your home, your father, your partner, be it no matter what their gender is, committing violence against you. But that we actually build a society where those things don't continue to happen. Right? That we work towards a society where those things don't continue to happen. Nothing happens overnight. And as I said, we are living in a world where the United States spends up to $80 billion a year putting people in cages. And black women and girls are among the fastest growing populations in the system. We have to do things differently. Look at Einstein that says doing things over and over again and expecting different results is insanity. Now that language is, quite ableist, right? The goal isn't to say that this is an insane system, but it is to say that this is a violent system. It is a violent system and it's an unsustainable system. We are closing schools and opening up prisons. Right? We are closing mental health institutions and hiring more police officers. What does that mean? And whether or not it impacts you, because it may not impact some of the folks in this room, it is impacting your neighbor. And it is impacting your child and the kind of world that they're going to, if you want kids one day, what kind of world they're going to live in. It's impacting the people who provide services, the people who clean your homes, the people who clean your grounds, the people who serve your food. It is impacting those people, and in turn that absolutely impacts your life. Either now or later, it will impact you. And so we have to make this a fight that we actually care about. Because it ain't just, I don't know how many folks watch Orange is the New Black with Piper Kerman. It ain't just Piper. It's not. And you shouldn't have to see yourself as Piper to see this as a fight that is necessary for you. You shouldn't have to think of Rekia Boyd as your sister or your friend in order for you to care. Tamir Rice doesn't have to be your son, your nephew, or your cousin in order for him to matter. These people should matter because they are human beings and they live in a world with you. And so I ask that if nothing else after you leave here is that you just think about the idea of living in a world without prisons or police. And if that's something that sounds cool to you, what would you be willing to do to make that happen? Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
At this time, we have the opportunity for question and answer. Is there anything that stuck out to you that you can question that
Yes.
well, after you see the answer, you can
Mm-hmm.
Also, what I think about is the profit and the privatized prisons. I'm not quite sure how to phrase that into a question.
Yeah.
But I think that has when I see a prison, I see a slave ship,
Mm-hmm.
and that frightens me.
Yeah.
But I think about how much our country, and if I didn't have a soul myself and have to sleep at night,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that would be a great investment for money. I'd be rich if I wanted to buy into the profits of a privatized prison. But how much do you feel that is affecting how marginalized, especially minority groups, rates of incarceration?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. So I'm going to read the 13th Amendment, which is a part of our U.S. Constitution. And it reads that it basically says that slavery is abolished and involuntary servitude is abolished except as punishment for a crime. That is in the United States Constitution, essentially codifying slavery in cases of when someone has committed a crime. And so the profit from punishment is on so many levels. Yes, it includes private prisons, but public prisons profit as well. Like corporations, individuals profit quite a bit from the incarceration of people, and it includes the prisons. It also includes surveillance. The ankle bracelet that people on house arrest have to wear. Marissa Alexander had to pay for that. There's money in that. Body cameras. You know, the reform of the day, the reform du jour. Body cameras. There's a lot of money to be made in body cameras. Body cameras will not stop police officers from killing us. They will not. They sound fun. They sound like, yes, if we just get it on camera. Well, they had video of Laquan McDonald. They had video of Walter Scott. They had video after video after video of a black person being gunned down. They had video of the little girls at, I'm going to get the name wrong, the high school, who was thrown out of her chair. Anybody remember the name of the high school? Spring something. They had video of that. They had video of the police officer body slamming the little black girl in her swimsuit. They had video of all that, and they still did it. And so body cameras won't do it, but there's a lot of money to be made out of body cameras. Mayor Rahm Emanuel in Chicago just announced a taser program as a deterrent for police officers killing people. Well, just a few years ago, a young man by the name of Dominique Franklin was tased and killed by CPD. And so tasers won't keep us safe either. There's a lot of money to be made from tasers. And so one of the things that BYP 100, we are releasing our agenda to build Black futures on February 1st, which is our economic justice platform. And one of our tenets is around taking profit out of punishment. And so absolutely, people profit off of it. Just as people profited off of slavery and how the American economy was built on the genocide of indigenous people and the enslavement, the forced enslavement of African people, this economy is continuing to run on the punishment of people. So yes. Yes.
Sorry. Thanks. I'm trying to figure out how to phrase this question the way that I want it to sound, but I feel like as a society, at least in my experience, we're so conditioned as children and as young adults where if you need help or if you see somebody else that needs help, you dial 911 or you call the police.
Oh, yeah.
So I guess my question is, and I don't even know if I'm expecting you to have an answer, but my question is, what is the alternative? Like, how do we break that conditioning in our minds, like when we need help or when we see somebody that needs help, but we don't want the results that we've been getting lately?
Yeah. So I think that's an excellent question. Most of my family members and many Black folks that I know believe that police are still, like, they should still exist, right? It's not a common held idea that, you know, actually the police don't keep us safe. That is our first instinct. We don't have other systems to look to. Like at wholesale, there are places and projects across the country where people are trying to create alternative hotlines, community response teams, things like that. So what would it mean that when a student, because we are on a college campus, when a student reports a sexual assault, what happens? You call security, right? I don't know if the person who has been assaulted feels any safer just because security showed up, especially when oftentimes the perpetrator remains on campus, right? And so what would it mean to have a non-police involved system where actually the person who assaulted the other person is held accountable for their actions, and there's some type of process that involves healing, a restoration of the person who was harmed, right? So look here on campus. What happens when students, if there's a so-called report of a suspicious character? Who's called? How does that operate? I live in a neighborhood that neighbors the University of Chicago, and where currently our office is. And the University of Chicago polices an area of about 65,000 people. So we have the University of Chicago Police and the Chicago Police Department. And I don't even live right by the university or in Hyde Park, but I'm starting to see University of Chicago police cars near my home. And so that does not make me feel safe. So what does policing look like? particularly campus police, and how much power do they have. That has to change. And so there are things like, how do we look at creating community-based responses that are informed and survivor-centered, and create those within within the communities that we live in. I think those things are essential, because time and time again, the police don't actually address the problem. Yes.
Thank you. I have actually more than one question, but I'll keep
Okay.
it to one. First, I would guess that you're not a fan of Rahm Emanuel, and you currently live in Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a little bit more about what you think has happened there,
Mm-hmm.
and whether you think he'll continue as mayor? Are you working, is your organization working to try to get him to resign? If you could just comment on that for a little bit. And then my other point isn't actually a question, but I wanted to make a plug, given that you're talking about different types of justice, and I work in the Office of Citizenship and Civic Engagement here, and one of my coworkers coordinates a program called the Diversion to Assets program, and she works with first-time nonviolent juvenile offenders who are from the greater Biddeford area, and she helps them to find community service opportunities to build their assets in different ways. And one of the things that she always does is try to match them up with a mentor from UNE, a student mentor. So if any of you are interested in doing that, come visit us in DeCary 318. So I'll stop with my plug and let you answer the question about Rahm Emanuel.
Great. There are a few rooms I go in these days where people don't ask me about Rahm Emanuel, who's the mayor of the city of Chicago. So Rahm Emanuel has demonstrated time and time again that he lacks a moral compass and a capacity for compassion for the people who he has been elected to serve. He's done that over and over and over again, from the closing of over 50 public schools, where over 97% of the students who were impacted are black students. Over 50 schools closed. He closed 6 mental health facilities. 6 of those. People fought to keep them open, and now people are fighting again to reopen them. And we need even more than just that 6, right? He was involved and is involved in the cover-up around the killing of Laquan McDonald. And so our organization, along with a number of other organizations, like Fearless Leading by the Youth in Chicago, who recently won a campaign for a trauma center on the south side of Chicago after fighting the University of Chicago for years to have a trauma center. An organization called Asada's Daughters, Black Lives Matter Chicago, and many, many other people have been calling for Rahm Emanuel's resignation. Again, on this basis that he has shown a complete ineptitude and inability to lead and govern with responsibility and compassion. And so, yes, we are involved in that work. I do not believe in his ability, or I have no faith or confidence in his ability to continue to lead. And we believe that he should resign and hold himself accountable. And should he not resign, he does have an election in several years, right? And so I think it's important for us to continue to call for his resignation, and also to build power in Chicago, right? He is an example of one of many corrupt mayors in this country, and they hold entirely too much power over our lives. He, along with the Cook County State's Attorney Anita Alvarez, who I mentioned earlier, they colluded in the corruption and the cover-up around the killing of Laquan McDonald. And so, yeah, he has to go. He has to go, and in recognition that he's one of a broader corrupt system that has to be transformed and fits into this idea of abolition.
Hi, I have a question about your organization. Could you maybe talk about what the biggest struggle to create it was, and if you're working on something currently, could you speak about that, please?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you. So BYP 100, we've pretty much built it from scratch. Our sister organization, the Black Youth Project, existed several years before BYP 100, and Kathy Cohen was actually the person who was primarily responsible for convening us in 2013. And so she took the posture very early on to say they're going to be autonomous. They're going to build this organization out into what they want to make it into, and she has supported us since the very beginning. And so we run our own organization. We fundraise all of our own money for the organization. And the biggest struggle is there's so many. But one of them is that we're working with people who have been hurt and harmed and traumatized, and we haven't ever fully experienced democracy. I have young people in my organization who never voted. The first time they voted was in BYP 100, like a vote that we took. Like, they don't vote because they don't believe in it. And then we have people who are elected officials and people who run electoral campaigns and do civic engagement work. So it's super, super, like, the meaning of diversity goes beyond, like, just, like, put one person here and, oh, that's diversity. No. There's such a depth of ideas and identities and experiences. And so that's a lot to handle. And we take our democratic process very seriously in our organization. And our values, having integrity around our values, is hard. And it's not because we don't believe in those things. It's not because we don't believe in our values. It's because it's hard to live up to your values, right? It's hard to put something on paper and actually do it. Right? To say that you are radically inclusive, to say that you have a black queer feminist praxis, to say that. And then when something happens, to actually live up to it. When the tough conversations come up, when sexual assault comes up, when violence comes up in various forms, when you just disagree with somebody, right? Committing to struggling with those things is hard. And at the same time, we've come out on the other side of them or working through those things without falling apart. And so we're still here, despite our many, many imperfections and struggles. So, yeah. Thank
you. So, like, back home, I live in Poland. I was involved with, like, various different groups that kind of like did like a little bit of the work that you guys do, but I guess like back in like being back in school, I kind of feel like I don't really know like what to do or like how to like help out and still put like my voice out there. So like, are there any recommendations that you have for like current college students who are like very passionate and like about these issues and want to help out but don't really know how to go about it?
Mm-hmm. Well, one, thank you for that question. That's a great question. College is always weird. Like, college activism and community organizing is weird. It's just, you're in a weird position because you're in this space to spend however many years that you're here to learn, right? To develop your consciousness, to develop skills, all of that stuff. At the same time, you are faced by institutional pressures, realities. I remember my first year in school, there were 3 black girls in my dorm, and some of the white girls said the most ridiculous things to us. Some of the most ridiculous things, like about our skin, about our hair, just foolishness. And so those, like what some people call microaggressions, or what the scholarship calls microaggressions, those things happen. And then you have more institutional things like you can't afford to pay for books, or you can't afford your tuition, like those system level problems that poor students, black students, Latino students, and indigenous students, and many students have. So you have to figure out like what you even want to fight for, why you're just trying to get your education, right? And so you have a lot up against you already as a student, or you could have a lot. Some people don't have that much up against them as a student. Some of us do. And so I think it's, again, like with any fight you take up, it's about discovering what makes you upset, what in your gut unsettles you that you have to do something about it. What is that thing? And then you go out and find other people who also in their gut, it unsettles them and they want to do something about it. And of course, there's organizing manuals and strategy things, all that good stuff. But I say you start here first, or just with you, figuring out what's important to you. And then, especially since you've been involved with organizations that are outside of campus, wherever you can and however you can, maintain those relationships. Because those are the things that are most important. Not you just working on a campaign, but are you continuing to be in relationship with those people? Because you're going to leave this place one day. And perhaps you'll go back to Portland. I've knocked doors in African immigrant communities and Muslim communities in Portland. It was years ago. And I don't know how you identified, but that was like one of the communities that I was in. And I can remember some of the conversations, and I can imagine that many of those people might still be there. And I don't know them anymore, right? But you have an opportunity from whatever community. Are you from Portland? So you're from there to maintain those relationships with people, because those are the things that are going to keep you connected to the work, even once you have a different set of education and class privilege, perhaps, once you graduate. Maybe if you have that, once you graduate and leave this institution. So hold on to people. Okay.
I think we're good.
All right.
Thank you very much, everybody. Yeah, round of applause.
Thank you.